All right, great. So that brings us to the end of our new faculty research forum. I think it's hard not to sit through these all these talks today and not feel really excited and optimistic about the future of science at UT Southwestern. And I do think that we're super fortunate in this environment here to have an administration that's really supportive of our research programs. And I think it's probably pretty unique to have our Dean of Basic Science sitting in the front row the entire day for every talk, taking notes furiously. And I think I even saw her scribble some dollar signs as some of the speakers were talking, but you'll have to talk to her directly about that. So thank you for all of your support. And I also want to thank Rui Ling. We were supposed to be co-organizers on this, and I have to say her energy and creativity is really what brought this together. Adding, kind of updating the format, adding the videos of our speakers. If you haven't looked at these yet, take a moment to go online and see those presentations, new ways of advertising the symposium. So really great. I think she deserves a big round of applause for all that she did. And then one final thing, most importantly, I think we should thank all of our speakers again for doing such an amazing job. So, yeah.
I wanted to just say add to Lee's thanks to Rui Ling, to all of the speakers. And then I also want to thank Lisa and Heather. And, you guys really helped to make this a great day. And thank you very much.